Back in Thanksgiving, I built an app over the weekend, and then by Christmas, I was monetized. And I gained 1,000 users plus really quickly. And for me, it was just this eye-opening moment of, oh my gosh, the world of software development has changed. Like I said, super grateful for you setting this up and the opportunity to collab with No Code Exits. Love the publication. So this is a really cool opportunity for me, and I'm stoked to talk about this. This is something I've been thinking a lot about for the
Cool.
past very intensely for 5 months. So this prompt-driven development stuff is software development is changing rapidly, and this is maybe the most kind of pointed example of that, I think. But a little bit about me. I'm Andrew, go by Andrew Ships online. My day job is product manager, so that's what I'm typically doing. I'm also a content creator, really active on TikTok, ramping up the Substack and the YouTube, and I'm also a builder. I like to build apps. And the last application that I built is really what helped or gave me the opportunity to sort of craft this prompt-driven development framework that we're going to talk about today. But my own career path, I started as a dev, shifted into design, and then shifted into product, which is where I've been, I guess, since about 2018. So been in tech for a while, a decade and a half or so, and worked in a variety of industries, prop tech, fintech, AEC, which is architecture, engineering, construction software, and kind of been across the whole gamut in terms of org size, Series ABC, private equity backed, publicly traded companies. So pretty familiar with tech, the tech industry broadly. And if let me get this going. So back in Thanksgiving, you may have seen this in Josh's article, but back in Thanksgiving, I built an app over the weekend, and that version of the product is not what I ended up monetizing. I just want to be very clear about that. I iterated a couple times after that, but it is true that I built the V1 over Thanksgiving in a couple days, and then by Christmas I was monetized. And I'm not going to retire off this yet, but I am monetized, and I gained 1,000 users plus really quickly. And for me, it was just this eye-opening moment of, oh my gosh, the world of software development has changed because I couldn't believe that I was able to do all of that so quickly. And so many people are able to do that so quickly now. The really wild thing is I didn't write any code, right? I worked with LLMs every step along the way. It's a Node.js React app in this case. You can build whatever you want, of course. Uses Postgres, Stripe for payments, Heroku for hosting, SendGrid for email, Cloudflare for DNS. And so, like I said, didn't write any code, worked with LLMs the whole way. And that methodology is what I'm calling prompt-driven development. Here's a screenshot of the homepage. It's a really cool product. It's called Distill. There's the URL on the left if you want to check it out. It's kind of this hyper personalized market intelligence slash newsletter product. You can follow any topic that you want. I use it every day, and it's a little bit like Google Alerts, but with the magic of LLMs baked into it. It's pretty sweet. Really proud of it. So, what is prompt-driven development? At a high level, it's it's a development workflow in which the developer is primarily prompting an LLM to generate all the necessary code. LLM, for anyone who's not familiar, large language model, think ChatGPT. And so instead of the developer, him or herself, directly writing all the code out by hand on a typewriter, on a keyboard, the developer is talking to the LLM, prompting the LLM, asking it to write code in a very particular way, and it's doing all that coding. And the developer's primarily evaluating the quality of that code, determining whether or not to accept or reject it, and then move forward. And so let's first take a look at what a traditional software development workflow looks like. This is very high level, right? We're not going to go into the weeds on all the nuances of software dev, but high level traditional software development looks something like this. Developer probably received some requirements. Ideally, they were involved in generating those requirements because they're working closely with product and design, but that's another conversation. Developer receives some requirements, iterates locally in their IDE of choice, right? They're writing some code, they test it out, it works or it doesn't, and then they move forward until they get it where it needs to be. And then they submit it for review if they're working on a team. And that either gets rejected or gets some feedback, and then you iterate some more, or it gets accepted by the team, by the reviewing developer, and that code gets merged into the code base. High level, that's typically what software development looks like. And the developer's probably using something like this, which is an IDE. You got your file on the left-hand bar here. You got your terminal in the bottom, and this main panel is your code. You can open your files and edit your code, and that's typically what you're doing. Prompt-driven development looks similar, but there's a couple of critical differences. So we start the same way, receive some requirements, but then we do something different with those requirements. We would break them into prompts. So instead of going right to code, you'd break the requirements into a series of prompts that make sense. And then with those prompts, you would iterate with the LLM. And that iteration looks something like prompt the LLM, LLM writes the code, review the LLM code. This is a really important step that I don't see a lot of people talking about, but you really should be reviewing the code that the LLM writes. You review the code that human developers write, so why not review the code that AI writes for us? We should be doing that. And you just iterate. Sometimes it takes one pass, and your prompt was able to sort of infer from the LLM exactly the code you need, and you can just move on and submit it for review. Oftentimes, that's not the case. Oftentimes, you need to iterate with the LLM, and that's what that loop is. And then from there, the process is the same, right? It either gets some feedback or it gets merged. And so it's these two steps in the blue box. These are the new things that really make up what prompt-driven development is. Breaking the requirements into a series of prompts. That's a different step in the process. It's a different skill to develop. And then working with the LLM, which is a new skill to develop as well. Tooling probably looks pretty similar. In this case, this is what I use. This is a screenshot of my cursor IDE, and I'm pointing up here to the top right. The main difference between prompt-driven development and traditional development is when I click that little button on the top right, you get a side panel here. It might be a little small, but you can see it says chat, it says composer, and then there's this new feature called bug finder, which I actually haven't played with much yet. But I'll talk about chat and composer. This is an IDE that gives you a direct window into an LLM. You probably can't see, but there's a little drop down right here where my mouse is, where you can select your model. It's currently selected as GPT-4o. And so that's what's so freaking cool about this new tooling that's sprung up is LLMs are now making their way into IDEs, and you can work with the AI in the context of your code. You can hand it your code context super easily. You can chat with it. You can use this composer feature, which is really, really powerful. If you prompt chat, the LLM will just respond to you as it's doing here. You can see it's writing tickets for me. Ticket 5, implement email service. If you prompt Composer, it will edit your code for you and present a diff. And I think I have a visual of that coming up. But it's a really interesting kind of new way of working. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But who's it for? Who is prompt-driven development for? I think it's for everyone. I really do. I think it's relevant to people who've never coded in their life and are interested. I think it's relevant for super senior engineers who've been doing this for 25 years. I think it's relevant for everyone. I do think that this spectrum matters, though. It matters a lot. And if you're on the left-hand side of the spectrum, the less technical side of the spectrum, great. If you don't have a ton of coding experience, you haven't worked with developers a lot or in and around tech a lot, great. Prompt-driven development is still really relevant. I would encourage those on the left-hand side of the spectrum to initially think of prompt-driven development as a framework to help you learn fast, because you do want to have a technical foundation to be shipping to prod, accepting payments from customers, and so on and so forth. You want to have some confidence there. But PDD can actually help you get to the right-hand side of the spectrum I think, a lot faster than for example, the way that I learned software development back in the day, right? I think people can learn so much faster now with having LLMs in their toolkit. If you're on the right-hand side of the spectrum, you're pretty technical or maybe very technical. I would think of PDD as a framework to help you ship fast, right? And and it can really help you do that. And so again, if you're on the left-hand side, use it to learn, and it'll push you over to the right-hand side, and then you'll get some confidence and some foundational technical foundation to start shipping more. Another reason I mentioned this, this one in particular, is because I haven't seen any super recently, but every now and then I'll see a post that's kind of focused on, here's my mega prompt that will build an entire application for you, and you can put that on the internet and have people use it. And I think that's really cool. It's cool to see the magic of AI happen that way, but it's not really a great way to learn. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind, for us as communicators and educators, just to let people know that really you want to be learning, building your technical foundation. And this kind of like zero shot application development is maybe not the best path. Let's talk about workflow a little bit. In terms of tooling, there's two broad categories. You have your traditional or basic chat products on the left-hand side, and then you have what I call LLM native IDEs. I'll talk about both. So your chats are stuff like ChatGPT, you got Claude, you got Gemini, products I'm sure we all know and have tried, maybe use every day. And the workflow, if you're using a chat primarily in PDD, then you probably have your IDE open here on the right and your chat of choice open on the left. And what you would be doing is you'd be reading your code on the right and thinking about what you need to do and what you want to add and finding the files. And then you'd come up with your prompt and you'd prompt the chat on the left. And then you would manually copy this code over and then paste it into the right spot on the right. It can work fine. I have friends and people in my network that like this workflow. This is what they do, and they've had good success with it. It's not the workflow I use, but it is a valid workflow if it's your preference. I prefer the LLM native IDE workflow because it basically takes those two tools and smashes them into one product. I think it's a lot smoother and a lot faster. And so these are products like Cursor, that's what I use, Bolt, Lovable, Replit, V0, Windsurf, the list goes on. There's a lot of products popping up in this space. It's a really busy competitive space right now, which is good for us builders. I use Cursor. My hot take on this is that all of these products are basically the same thing. And the most important thing to do as a builder right now is to pick one of these and stick with it. I don't care if you use Cursor, Lovable, Replit, whatever. I would just recommend maybe thinking twice before you go through all of these and spend the cycles evaluating them, testing them out. They're all kind of the same thing. There's little differences here and there, but really what you want to be getting good at is PDD, not the IDE, because the IDEs, all the functionality is converging. You can see it happening in real time if you follow these products. They're all watching each other. They're all kind of copying each other, and the functionality is converging. The UX patterns are converging. And so the workflow here is similar to this, right? Except that it all happens in the same window. You have your chat on the right-hand panel that I talked about earlier. You can have it generate code here and you can paste it in. Or what I would recommend is use the composer feature, and that will actually edit the files for you, present a diff, and you can accept or reject the code changes line by line, or section by section rather. And I think that's the best workflow. And so let's talk a little bit more about these two new steps in PDD: breaking requirements into prompts and then iterating with the LLM. So if I look at these two steps, this is what my workflow looks like. Here on the bottom right, that's me, the emoji with the laptop, and then on the left is the cursor icon, and I have an arrow that says 80%. So most of the time, what I'm doing is I'm just here in Cursor, right? Going back and forth with Cursor, prompt, review, prompt review, prompt review. Most of the time, that's what I'm doing. I'd say about 15% of the time, I'm using instead of the composer window, I'm using the chat window. And I'm probably using something like GPT-4o, and I'm working with that model to help me think through a technical approach or to help me write tickets. You may have seen in a previous slide in the screenshot, in my cursor chat, it was writing tickets for me, ticket 5, right? Build email functionality. And I'll work with another model to help me do that. And then I take each of those tickets and then I paste those one at a time into the composer feature in cursor. And then I'm back to this 80% loop, one ticket at a time, bang, bang, bang. And then about 5% of the time, I'll use some sort of reasoning model, O1. Now there's O3. See, I made this slide, made this image, I don't know, a month ago. This is how fast this landscape is changing. O3's out, and then there's, I guess, R1, DeepSeek. There's reasoning models coming out, right? More sophisticated models. And so I don't use them just to write a ticket or two. I don't think it's necessary. I get plenty of quality out of a regular model. But if I want to do something like a really big change, completely change my architecture, or if I want to start a new project, I'm probably going to enlist a reasoning model to write a whole bunch of tickets for me, 15 tickets. And it does it really well. If I ask 4o to write 15 tickets for me, it's going to be like, but these reasoning models have really long outputs and they can handle that sort of request. And then once I do that, I'm back to this 80% loop with cursor, right? One ticket at a time. If we zoom in on this iterating with the LLM loop, one way I talk about it is that it's a prompt review test loop, PRT for short. And so what that looks like is you prompt the LLM, you review the code, always do that. And by the way, depending on where you are on the technical spectrum, if you're on the less technical spectrum, this review stage is really a learning opportunity. If you're seeing stuff you don't know what it means, you're confused, you're not really sure what's going on, cool. Open up another model, open up a chat window, and start asking it questions. What's going on here? Explain the code here, whatever. What does this method do? What's an API? What's going on with the database? Just start asking it questions and interrogating it. If you're on the more technical side, then you're really just doing a code review. Personally, what I'm trying to achieve in the review step is I want a general understanding of what's happening because I want to feel confident that it's actually making the changes that I want it to make. I'm not really evaluating for code performance. Some people might want to do that if you need really, really performant code. But in the stuff that I'm building, at the scale I'm at, it's not that important. So I'm mostly just trying to get a general understanding of what's happening in the code changes. And then you want to test it locally, and just run it in your browser, right? If it looks good, cool. Like commit, commit to your Git repository, and then move on. I recommend committing after every meaningful increment, basically after every ticket. It's just way easier, way better that way. In your test phase, if something doesn't look right, if it's broken, if there's an error, if the UX isn't right, something's off. Loop back around. Obviously, don't commit that. But when you're looping back around, you want to grab some more context. So that context could be the error messages themselves. Open up your terminal or look at your console in the browser. Just copy the error messages, grab all of it, paste it in the next prompt. Hey, I'm getting an error. Here's the error block. Bunch of text.
Hey,
If there's
Andrew,
no,
I'm sorry. We actually have a few questions coming in. This one's kind of relevant to what you're talking about.
cool.
Rodrigo asks, how much is the minimum technical know-how to be able to do this work? Where would you, if you're a complete beginner, then I guess, where would you suggest learning first?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I would suggest, let me go back here. I would suggest starting by working with either 4o or O1 or O3, working with another model to focus on your technical approach. Instead of going straight to cursor, I would work with 4 and kind of talk about, hey, here's what I want to build. Here's how I'm thinking it should work. Um, Help me be the senior engineer, 4o, and help me think through my technical approach and how I should go about crafting out individual tickets that I can then paste into Cursor. Just explain what you're going to do. And and then it'll do that for you, and then you can start testing those one at a time. And when you're in this code review stage, it's a big learning opportunity. It might be a lot all at once, but if you just keep working at that, keep testing the changes out to see what it looks like in the browser, you'll get the hang of it eventually.
Oh, makes a lot of sense.
Really, really good question. Let's see. I'm looking at the clock. So I'll be quick with this one. Andre Karpathy, he's awesome. If you don't follow him, check him out. He recently coined a term vibe coding, which is really cool. And I just want to contrast it with prompt-driven development briefly. So vibe coding is this kind of very casual, no code review, more playful, exploratory mode of working with an LLM to generate code, usually for throwaway projects or hobby projects. Whereas prompt-driven development is really intended to be a more structured process, structured framework, more methodical, and should be appropriate for getting your stuff onto production and shipping out products that you can monetize. So in the survey I sent out, quite a few of you asked about increasing code quality. A little bit of a trick question. How do I increase my code quality? We've maybe heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. You oftentimes hear that in data context, data analytics, or data engineering, but it's relevant here too. It's relevant in a lot of contexts. So your prompt quality, in my view, really determines your code quality in this methodology. And so to get better code quality, you want to have better prompts. And so I'm going to walk through as many of these mental models as I can until we run out of time. But I have a few mental models for success here. One thing I want to call out is I could bring up some specific prompt structures to show you all. And there's some good stuff out there. I would encourage you to take a look. The thing is it's also contextual. What product are you building? What's your technical skill set? What sort of team are you working on? All of that matters in terms of what your prompts look like. And so I prefer to think in terms of mental models because they're much more adaptable and extensible. So the first one is act as if you're the entire product team. It's all about the variety of context that you're giving to the LLM. And so oftentimes, what I see people doing is focusing on the engineering piece, or maybe the design piece as well, and giving that context to the LLM. I want you to write a function that does X, or I want the user to click a button and it does Y. And that's really, really good. But you also want to be layering in some product details too. Why is it important for the business? You don't have to add too much context there, but it does help actually. Give your technical approach, describe the UX that you want to happen, and then also describe how a QA engineer might actually check to make sure that it's working. Describe the test that you want to perform in your browser downstream. This will all help your prompt quality. And by the way, I think this is also related to another thing I've been thinking about, which is that I think generalists are going to win in the near to mid or in the mid to long term. Not that these roles are going to disappear, but I think we're going to see more of this product generalist pop up because you can do so much with prompt driven development. This is another mental model that I think for anyone who has either been a junior dev on a new team or has helped onboard a junior dev into a new team, this will really resonate. So think of the AI as a junior developer who's new to the project. AI is the new guy. Help him out. He doesn't know what's going on. Computers are not that smart. We gotta really tell him what's going on. This is a lot of text, but this is really just breaking down some aspects of what a development ticket might look like for a junior developer new to a project versus a senior developer who's been on the project for a year. I can share these slides out later, but the high level here is the junior dev gets a lot more context. They get things like links to documentation, visual examples, supportive and encouraging. I don't know, that could help. But basically, you're going to give the junior developer so much more instruction than you would a senior dev who knows the code really well. And the point of this mental model is actually less about the AI being dumb, and it's more about forcing you, the prompter, to really improve your prompt quality. Because if you think of the AI as a junior dev who doesn't know what's going on, you're going to have to really, really guide it. And that forces you to write excellent prompts. This might be the last one I go over, but context, specificity, and scope. The best prompts have high context, high specificity, and narrow scope. I'll define those. Context is the actual snippets of code or files in your code base that you're providing to the LLM. So low context is make these changes in the backend. That could be anywhere. High context, adjust the get marker function in the backend routes user.js file. Very specific. And by the way, here's 3 more files that that method interacts with. You've just given the LLM ton of code context. That helps a lot because it lets it read all that code to see how things connect together. Specificity is how clearly defined and precise the ask is. Low specificity, when a user clicks submit, add their submission to the feed. Yeah, it makes sense, but it's not that specific. High specificity might actually describe what's happening in the system. When a user clicks submit, call the save submission endpoint to store the submission in the database. Once saved, automatically call the load feed function, etc., etc. You're very specifically describing what's happening in the system. And scope, it's how much we're asking the LLM to change all at once. You want to narrow your scope, be more specific, more precise in your ask, more narrow in your ask. Broad scope is add a settings page where the user can manage and update their account. It's a lot going on there. What do we mean by manage and update their account? Narrow scope is add a toggle on the settings page where a user can set their account to private or public. That's a narrower ask. It's just one change on the user profile, private or public with a toggle, instead of managing their whole account. What does that actually mean? You're not going to get great results from that. So we're a little over time. There's a lot more, or there's a few more that I'm not going to be able to go over. But I'm going to flip to the end here and I guess open it up for any questions if there are any, if people need to drop. Totally cool. Josh, back to you.
We've got a few questions in here if you got some more time.
I got a couple minutes.
First one is from Ryan. Have you had success to get the LLM to do the code review during the iterates with the LLM section?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Ryan, I have not experimented with that. I know that products like Devin, I believe, claim to do that, and they might actually do that. I think it's a really interesting idea. That's probably where all this stuff is going. But no, I have not had success with that because I haven't really tried it. For me, I know I didn't talk about it, but I'll flip up to this slide here because this is relevant. In my opinion, I think the AI should only be writing as much code as you can understand because it's actually just as important that your brain is keeping up with the changes as it is that the LLM's like doing all the work, right? And so if I have the LLM then review itself, then I'm not doing the work of understanding the changes. And then I wind up in a situation where I have a lot of bugs. So that's my take on it. Good question.
Gary asked, what about agents, AI agents?
Hmm.
That's a little different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And Cursor actually released an agents feature recently. High level, they'll do a lot more for you. It's kind of like this asynchronous, autonomous situation where if you use Composer in Cursor, you ask for a change, it immediately changes your files, and it's pretty quick. If you use the agents feature, you ask for a change, it'll get busy tinkering, thinking, trying a couple things out. It might actually review itself a little bit, and then it'll ultimately present the changes to you. But if you want the AI to go much further and make a lot more changes, agents are probably the right approach there.
And then there's some questions about using Lovable or Cursor, which model you find better. So I think we'll leave it here, and Andrew's going to go ahead and send an update through the event. So look out for that. He'll include where you can go follow him, find out more information, things like that. And of course, stay updated on the newsletter because we plan on doing a lot more of these expert lives. And if this is something that you thought was really interesting, please send us the feedback. Let us know what you think. All right.
That's awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Josh. I'm going to do a hands-on Let's Build Together workshop in the near future. So I dropped a link in the chat feel free to add your name to the list, anyone. But Josh, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again.
Of course. Thank you. All right, everyone. Take care.
See ya.